So, just a bit of a background on Sally. So, Sally Wells is a workplace consultant and professor with the University of New Brunswick Faculty of Law. Sally graduated from Memorial University in Newfoundland in 1977 with a Bachelor of Social Work, followed by 5 years working in psychiatry and family medicine. In 1985, she graduated with a law degree from the University of New Brunswick and was admitted to the Law Society of New Brunswick in 1987. Sally practiced law in a small firm, followed by a 10-year term at the Law Society of New Brunswick, where she was the Director of Continuing Legal Education. For the past 25 years, she has operated a successful practice as a workplace consultant in Atlantic Canada. Sally teaches dispute resolution at the UNB Law School. And Sally is well known for her sense of humor, joie de vivre, and her availability to make people laugh while learning. She can be in a hard hat and construction boots one day and be in a boardroom or municipality the next day. Her examples are real and very practical, and she ties theory and practice together. And she's going to lead us in a conversation around emotionally intelligent communication. So over to you,
Yes.
Sally, and thank you for being here.
Thanks a million. I just want to say that I'm just so proud of Mira McQueen and its efforts in bringing this respectful workplace to such a broad scope. And who knew that COVID would have us on Zoom and Teams and other platforms in a way that we can share this? Because many years ago, we were in the library down on Queen Street doing a workshop with maybe 30 people. And now look at it. I mean, it's just fabulous. You've got so many people did so much work to make this happen. And I just want to thank all those people up front, because it's a ton of work that I know that went on in the background to make this happen today. So I have to acknowledge that for sure, because I remember the roots very well.
Thank you for acknowledging some of the evolution. And I know that was mentioned yesterday in
Oh,
the opening.
absolutely.
It started in the library and now to our 10th annual.
Yeah, I just want to say hello to everybody, even though I can't see anybody. It's very funny talking to a blank screen. However, I want to talk a little bit about what is communication, first of all, and how it's actually a matter of perspective, and whether or not a message has been sent and received or acknowledged, because we all have different backgrounds, different perspectives, different ways of seeing things, different ways of looking at the exact same information or the exact same image, and maybe every one of us sees something completely different. And I thought I'd share a little laugh at self-deprecation, I guess, in a way. Many years ago, there was an ad on television. It was particularly on during the curling season. And it was a person in a market in Asia walking around these vendors' markets outside. And they sent a picture home and said, look, I need to do something. And the person sent them back a picture of a toilet. So the person at the market in Asia was going around pointing at the toilet. And I said to myself for several months, why would anybody shop for a toilet in Asia? That was my takeaway. Until one day I was with other people watching the ad. And I said, look, why would people shop in Asia for a toilet to have it shipped back home? And they said, they're not shopping for a toilet. They want to go to the bathroom. So it's a matter of perspective, I think, about how we send and receive messages, what we all see and take away from messages, whether they're the written word, whether we're face to face, and whether or not we have the way we communicate, I guess, not just face to face, but email, texting, all kinds of other spaces now where we've used email. I mean, I remember when email came in, and the information highway came in back when I was at the Law Society in the late 90s, and just the learning curve of what is this, how did this happen, wow, how can we use this in a productive way, how can we use this in a meaningful way. And I think we've still got a lot to learn about some of those forms of communication, how we send messages, how they're received, those multiple modes of communicating now that are beyond face to face. I mean, here we are on Zoom today with lots and lots of people. So it's actually a good thing that we can share this knowledge and use some of these tips, hopefully, that you can take away today to incorporate into your day-to-day lives, but also into your workplaces, which is where it's more critical now than ever that we incorporate emotionally intelligent behavior into our communication. So whether we're online, face to face, there's always going to be a tone, either imputed or real. So some people might make up a tone. They may read it and think, wow, that's really short or rude. And actually, maybe the person is actually being time management oriented. They're not adding any bits and pieces, or they don't add anything that's not necessary. So sometimes it's our method of communication or how we communicate in person and or online that sometimes people kind of read that and go, wow. So we have to be thinking carefully too that we're not making up something either, or we're not making up somebody's tone. And it's our responsibility to inquire about that as well and say, look, maybe I could have said it this way, or ask them what they meant by that. And sometimes after a couple of emails back and forth, we may have to either pick up the phone or call a person and say, or go down the hall if we're in a building with a person and say, look, I just want to clarify this because, it's not possible any further to do this in a written way without it getting really cumbersome and confusing. So if we can limit people's confusion, then we're being emotionally intelligent. So I think that's a very important thing. Sometimes if you're not clear, you think it's gone back a couple more times than is necessary, then do something else to carry on the conversation. The other thing around our communication with whomever we're communicating with is, what is our prior history? So how do we know the person? We don't communicate the same way with our best friends as we necessarily may with our parents, for example, or with our teacher when we were students. There's a power dynamic at play in all relationships as well. Are we on equal footing with the person with whom we're communicating and having conversations? So all these things are very important. How we communicate with our spouses, sometimes with our best friends, people we work with. I used to work with a person way back when and do training in the late 90s and early 2000s. And when we do our training together, we were doing mediation training and investigations training. And people would say, you guys can finish each other's sentences. But it's because we had a level of trust and a level of familiarity with our subject material that we played off each other extremely well. And someone said to us one day, look, are you two married? We say, no, if we were married, we wouldn't be able to communicate this well. It became kind of a joke. But we were very lucky in our relationship that we knew when to step back and for the other person to step in. We knew enough for one person to take over when the other one maybe needed a break. So you can sometimes develop that really good communication style with somebody. And I think that's a wonderful thing if we can have that with people. But it's incumbent upon us as coworkers, as colleagues, as partners, as spouses, as friends, as whatever role we're in. It's incumbent upon us to be mindful of our choice of words, of our use of language, of our tone, our verbal, nonverbal stuff when we're together and when we're not together, because there's a lot of nonverbal cues in written communication by its very nature, but we may put in an emoji or an exclamation mark or other grammatical things, and it's saying something to the other side that we may not have intended. However, the other person takes it that way. I was in a hierarchical relationship a number of years ago, and my superior sent me an email with all capitals and a lot of exclamation marks and little asterisk marks for all the upper, in the above all the letters there on the keyboard. And it had said, "What is this?" And it was like da da da. And I'm like, "Yikes! It's a request for a travel claim," to myself. And I went, I thought it was clear anyway. So I called them. I said, "Hi, I just need to clarify. Did you have a question about what I sent?" because I couldn't answer that by email appropriately, because part of me really wanted to be maybe sarcastic in my deepest heart of truth. If I'm being emotionally intelligent, I'm telling you the truth. So I kind of called them and said, look, what is it you need to understand, or what is it you need to know, or what do you need clarification about? And they asked me, and I gave them I answered all the questions. And I did take the opportunity to say, you know, it really was confusing to me, or it felt really awkward for me to get a message that said, what is this, with all those other bits, because I wasn't sure what that meant. So I'm just inviting you to know that that really, you know, kind of made me feel, whoa, I was kind of hit in a way. So I took the responsibility of that. And they said, well, that's how I communicate with everybody. However, I discharge what I would call my due diligence, or my duty, to not be okay with getting email of that sort. And I think we need to do a little more of that as well, take some responsibility around those things. Now, when we do written communication with other people, whether it's, you know, via email or messaging, instant messenger, you've got a lot of government offices have internal messaging too, private messaging where they write back and forth. I think we really have to, before we write anything or type it in, we need to really sit back and ask ourselves, what is the purpose of this communication? Why am I sending this, and for what purpose? So if you sit down and take a minute to reflect with yourself about what you want to say, who needs to see it, why do they need to see it, then you can save yourself a lot of trouble or grief or consternation, I think, if you think about that before you do it. Because when we're sending those messages, if we know why we're sending it and to whom, how long it should be or how short it needs to be, are there facts that need to be in there? Is there information or data that needs to be shared with one person or multiple people? So think about that when you're getting ready to send anything out to anybody. The other question I think that we need to say to ourselves is, if this became public, or this was a public communication, am I okay with how I've written this? Or is there anything in here that could bring me under scrutiny later as being disrespectful or demeaning or embarrassing to anybody? Because an emotionally intelligent behavior would say that you're going to be mindful about the recipient, how they interpret something, and the words that you choose, and how you use language in your communications. Because there are times when we can get emotional. Sometimes we have a trigger or a response when we see something and we're like, oh, that's not what I meant. That's not what I said. You've taken it this way. So I think it's really important that we think about the receiver or the recipient when we're communicating, because that's what emotional intelligence directs us to do. And the other side of that coin, I think, is when we do get an email. I'll use an example. I might want to send Nicole an email. Hi, Nicole. Are you and George okay for the meeting on September the 18th? Look forward to hearing from you. Boom, I hit send. Now, Nicole knows that George is away on vacation until September the 16th. So she thinks to herself, oh, well, I won't answer that till George comes back on the 16th. So what's happening here in my perspective? Well, I've sent out the email on September the 10th. So I'm thinking, okay, I'll get an answer back so I can book the meeting for the 18th. Well, and Nicole is thinking, well, no, I'm not going to let her know till the 16th because George is away. So I'm kind of waiting. I'm waiting for the response. The solution to that is, hi, Sal. George is away till the 16th, but I'll let you know then. So why don't you tentatively book it and we'll see what happens. Perfect, thanks. Then I'm not looking and waiting for a response. So what's your general practice around responding to emails, I guess, is a good question, because I know that lots of times I respond within 24 hours. That's kind of my standard practice. Sometimes I respond when I ought not to, maybe 11 o'clock at night, but that's bad. Anyway, but I respond within 24 hours, only because that's just my practice that I'm acceptable with, and that's what I would like to have happen to me. So that's that golden rule of, have others treat you the way you want to be treated. Just because you want to book the day or put it in your book at least, and think that, have they forgotten you? Did they get it? What's going on? How come they're not getting back to me? So then you might call them again, maybe on the email on the 14th. Hi, just waiting to hear. Oh, sorry, George is away till the 16th. I was waiting for them to come back. Oh, okay. It would have been really helpful for me to know that. So those examples, we all have them. And what fascinates me is I get a lot of people saying, thank you for responding to my email. The first line is thank you. And I'm like, well, you don't have to thank me. It's kind of, I ought to reply to you. You emailed me. But it's amazing how many people say thank you, because I do know from experience that lots of times there's email that's not answered. And it fascinates me from one perspective. But I know that, yes, people are busy, but that doesn't necessarily mean we can't take a quick answer or do a quick response. So that's one of the things that we have to be mindful of, I think, when we're communicating. And the other thing is not to keep our emails too long, because sometimes if we put 2 or 3 things in there, oftentimes people will only answer number 1 and they don't get to number 3. So you're not really sure. It's like, oh, darn it, you answered my first one, my number 1.5, but I'm waiting for number 3 too. So, maybe if you bullet it, or, ask for a response by a certain time, because one thing might be more important than another. So it's incumbent too on the person sending the message to ask for what they want, but it's also incumbent on the recipient to read the whole thing thoroughly, so then it doesn't necessitate another back and forth or a second or third back and forth. So those kinds of tips, I think, in our day-to-day practice are very helpful, just from the perspective of someone who probably doesn't get a ton of emails in the run of a day or a week. And then there's people out there who get probably hundreds of emails per day. So you've got to sometimes pick and choose. And we can't always assume that something got received because of that whole spam situation and the thing where it goes into junk sometimes as well. So sometimes we have to be very mindful to recognize that maybe they didn't even get the message because of spam and firewalls and all kinds of other things as well. So now, when we're doing our communication via messaging to a lot of people or one person, if you belong to a group, you want to be very mindful around to whom you're sending it, around privacy considerations as well. Because I know I belong to some other groups, like, there's a couple of other groups that are not work related, but it's like you've got all these emails belonging to other people when they do that function where you can reply to all, or you put all these people in the top 2 section. You can also blind copy people rather than put everybody out there. So then the BCC doesn't show your full email and give away private information. So that's another important thing, because if there's 80 people in a group and you're wondering if they're all going to, to the potluck supper at the Legion on Saturday night, do you want 80 emails back saying, yes, I'm going, no, I'm not going, I'm bringing a casserole, no, John can't make it, he's sick, and Sue can't come because she broke her foot or what? And you're like, I don't want 80 emails from the people who are going or not. I just need to know that I'm going to go at 7 o'clock on Friday night, or Saturday night. So be careful about that as well when you're setting up your group stuff, that it doesn't have to go to all people necessarily, that you can use the BCC function really easily, and it will save a lot of unnecessary stuff coming into your box. And there are privacy issues around that as well, because you're actually sharing other people's information. So just be mindful about that, I would say. Now, in our written stuff too, we've got sort of stuff around grammar and punctuation, making sure we've got places for our commas and our hyphens and our, some people say, why do people use that ... meaning there's more to come? You know, some people use that more frequently than others. I probably don't use that so much in business, but I may use it privately. Emojis, where do they belong in business communication? That's a good question. I think you'd want to be very careful about that. But way back when email came out, originally, I was in those days doing divorce mediation, and I had a couple that you know, they had divided everything, and one lived upstairs, one lived downstairs, and things were going well with the mediation process. And the client wrote me, and she said something something LOL, and I looked at it and I went, "Oh dear, lots of love. Oh dear, oh my, lots of love." And I'm thinking that's a funny thing for a client to say to me. And so I asked somebody, I said, "Look, what does LOL mean?" And they said, "Laugh out loud." So if you're not in tune with that and you don't know the lingo, sometimes you can be taken aback. So be mindful about what we say, how we say it. Uh, you know, because not everybody knows what, you know, LOL necessarily means, or some of those other acronyms that are used in day-to-day communication, you know, via texting, you know, on Facebook and Messenger and all kinds of other places now. So we've got emojis that we didn't have, you know, when I graduated from MUN in 1977, as you said in the introduction. So we didn't even have fax machines back then. So it's a learning curve for those of us. You know, we have intergenerational and generational communication strategies that are so different. People have their credit cards on their phone now, so it's amazing. It's wonderful. It's great. All kinds of good uses for a lot of things, but we still have to be mindful about how we communicate in a respectful and emotionally intelligent manner, regardless of all of that improvement that we have. I think the other thing we need to do very carefully when we're sending written communication is proofreading and spell checking. Sometimes it picks up words that are still words, but they're just used in the wrong space, or this, you know, the spelling might be wrong or whatever. So we just have to be very mindful about that. I know sometimes I just kill myself laughing when I'm sending out something and I put down ho instead of how, like, you know, how are you going to do this? Ho, you're going to do this. So, you know, you want to be careful that you got the W on there when you're sending out the word how, because ho is a word. So be careful when you're sending something. I mean, there's things I've written sometimes. I think, my gosh, I'm glad I didn't hit the send button before I reread it, because they would have gone, oh, she's not being very respectful. It's just that you made a typing error. And I don't necessarily type sometimes very well. So you have to be very careful about that stuff. So now let's talk about Zoom and Teams and WebEx and all those other ways that we communicate now, especially post COVID, during COVID, because of COVID. And wow, here we are. So I know that you talked about the online teaching, and so back in 2020, a steep learning curve. Had to teach a course online that's a skill-based course. I was teaching dispute resolution at the law school, and I spent the summer taking tutorials on how to set up rooms for teams, and how to do groups, and how to turn on the functions, and how to make people, you know, show up and be there. And how do you do a course that's usually in a U shape live? How do you do that like this? Wow. So that was quite something. Anyway, it happened. It was different. Changed the curriculum, changed the assignments, changed the evaluation process, all of that. But then what do we need from each other when we're in that kind of an environment? So I think some of our emotionally intelligent communication too can transfer, has to transfer into these new ways of communicating. You know, so instead of getting on an airplane now and going, you know, somewhere to have a big conference, people are having these meetings. So I think it's important from a perspective of, you know, how we communicate and what we do. And we have to set out those expectations, I think, at the beginning about how we share our screens or not. When you're looking at, you know, a screen full of just initials, and you're hoping that your students would sort of come on and say, look, let's make a deal that we're going to be together in the room when we're having our conversations. And then when you go into your breakouts, that you'll see each other and be able to communicate. and do what you need to do in that manner. But I've witnessed a lot of different things on some of these meetings that I've been on in the last 2 years. There's been pussycats walking across the screen. There's been family members in the back yelling, looking for the cornflakes. People yelling in the background, dogs barking. So you really can't hear the speaker at the moment because there's a dog wanting to get out to do their thing. So it's interesting. There was another one where there was a rabbit on a desk eating somebody's papers. And I was like, oh gosh, this is so funny. Anyway, I just thought it was hilarious that there was, and I thought, I hope they're not confidential papers or important papers that somebody needs later down the road. And I guess, we all have watched the media and have seen other things that were quite funny too, where people stood up and didn't have much on and things of that sort. Or anyway, so I think it's important when we're looking at those modes of meetings that we still bring that same respect that we would in a live meeting, where we don't interrupt others. We are very mindful of our body language. We don't send messages that are inappropriate while we're on the screen. So when we have our live meetings, the person in charge always sets boundaries about what the expectations are for the behavior in those meetings and how we communicate and how we speak to each other. So I think this way actually, is a lot better in some ways in some of those live meetings because we can, set those boundaries a lot easier, and we can do things that are more respectful and certainly more emotionally intelligent. So just to be thinking about what are we doing, what are we saying, how are we saying it, how do we look, how are we appearing in terms of our use of language, our choice of words, our tone, our intention. Are we intentionally being respectful? Are we intentionally being emotionally intelligent? And I think now, regardless of whether it's on face to face or on a text or phone or this platform, email, whatever, are we being mindful of ourselves, our choice of language, words, and are we very aware of our impact on other people? So if we were the recipient of the very same message that we're sending, depending on the nature of the relationship with the person, has there been any prior conflict? Are we in a power dynamic? Are we in a hierarchy? How well do we know this person or these people? Very mindful about what is our impact going to be. What is the message that we're trying to send? So we need to choose our words, our timing. Sometimes we may get a message and think, that doesn't feel good for me. I'm going to respond right away. I'm going to not be okay with this. Sit back and take a few moments before you do that, I think is a good thing. What is the location of where you are? What are the phrases that you're going to use to effectively communicate? I think that emotionally intelligent behavior says that we're cognizant that words do matter. They very much matter. What we say to people and how we say it matters because we don't know necessarily how the other people may communicate or receive our communication. Sometimes we don't know people very well, and we have to be very careful about some of the language we choose. We have to be mindful of barriers to communication. Sometimes there's cultural barriers. Maybe there's multiple languages at play from people, and so the language that you're using may not be their first language. It may not be their first language. So we have to be very careful about that as well. We also have to look, what do they need from me? What do I need from them? So what are our overlapping needs here? So that we focus on when we're communicating, here's what you need, here's what I need, here's how we're going to make it happen. I just need you to respond X, Y, Z. Here's what I'm looking for. So looking at that, you're probably both looking for the same thing, but are we communicating it in a respectful, emotionally intelligent manner so that everything you send has to have that intention, that knowledge that we're communicating and it matters. how we choose the words, how we choose our tone, whether or not we're using grammatical things that might add some tone that people will take away and say, yikes, what did that mean? Like the example I gave you earlier about when I got, what is this, with a lot of those other things, exclamation marks and asterisks and all kinds of stuff. So we need to really be mindful about what it is we're looking for and what we need from the other person. I think the other thing that sometimes people will do is they throw in sometimes in their communication. Definitely, sometimes if there's a conflict in the email communication or the texting or whatever we're doing, the written word. If there's been a past conflict, people will sometimes bring up a lot of the emotion or the background stuff that, you always say this, you did this before, da da da. Be very careful, I think, when we're trying to resolve things, that we're not living in the past, that we've learned from it, but we're not living in it. And I think to bring it up again and again isn't going to be helpful or useful. So we have to, I think, give people some skills and tools
Il
around
faut donner des outils et des habiletés
communicating
autour de la communication. Que hier, c'est fini, c'est parti. Et on va communiquer ce qu'on a besoin de faire ici et maintenant. Est-ce que c'est pertinent? Est-ce que c'est approprié?
because sometimes we will stop reading something or we'll lose it and go, okay, what in here is the essence of what I need to respond to? What in here is the essence of what I don't need to attach to? But how do I let the person know that I'm dealing with this XYZ and what needs to be done? So, do we have that conversation with them around some of that stuff that's extraneous, I will call, or irrelevant? And they may see it as important, but it isn't. So I think that's very important as well, to get people to be very careful about what it is they're saying sometimes when they're responding to something that could be conflictual for them and maybe conflictual for the other person, but not to take it too far without trying to nip something in the bud. Because clarity is important, self-awareness is important. And a lot of leaders, unfortunately, don't have all the necessary emotionally intelligent quotient skills. And that is why we have so much mediation and so many investigations in workplaces around respect and about how people are being treated. Because it's not something that's necessarily taught when people become leaders. And you don't inherently have it as a skill necessarily, but it can be taught for sure. So we need to get people a little more high on the EI quotient for sure, and behavioral indicators around what can we do. So people who have emotional intelligence or emotionally intelligent behavior includes people who will address the nonverbal cues or a sense that they're not uncomfortable with body language, and they will inquire. They will say to someone, look, you just said this, or I just saw you kind of do that when I asked that question. Is there something else you need to tell me? Is there something else you'd like to share? So emotionally intelligent behavior says they're not afraid to ask what we call a clarifying question. And in our day-to-day world and in our work world and in our wherever else we are, whether we're in the lineup at the movie theater or in a shop, wherever we are, we really need to take a moment and think about clarifying questions and probing questions. They are your friends. The clarifying question is, what did you mean by? Or can you, if you just said this, what did that mean? Because I don't know that word and I've not heard that phrase before. So I think we really need to teach this in kindergarten, the art of asking clarifying, consequential, and probing questions. They are so important in emotionally intelligent questioning and communication, for sure. Because sometimes somebody will say something to us and we may walk away and say, what do they mean by that? I wonder what they meant by that. I wonder what they meant. And I didn't do it one time, and I wish I had. Anyway, it was years ago, many, many years ago, when I used to teach at the College of Extended Learning, way back when it was called that. And in those days, they gave out awards for teaching and stuff, excellence or something or other. Anyway, I remember it was a couple of years in a row, and I got this award. And anyway, I was kind of, I thought that's kind of funny because I just love doing this, and it's funny that I got this award. Anyway, so after a number of years, I got this award again. It was a beautiful sunny day. It was 22 degrees out, and I just wanted to go home. So I got the award, and this woman looked at me when I was leaving, and she said, "Sally, the only reason that you keep getting that award is because you're a Newfoundlander." And I just kind of laughed, and off I went. And so I got home, and I said, "I wonder what she meant by that. Why didn't I wonder what she meant by the only reason I get the award is because I'm a Newfoundlander." But I didn't ask, but I found it a curious comment. And I never did ask, but it was there with me. And I said, well, I could have asked, but I don't know what she meant. Anyhow, and then the next year I didn't get one, but I said, well, I'm still a Newfoundlander. I didn't get it. So I laughed because I thought I had the responsibility to say, what do you mean? And I didn't. Anyway, so sometimes we say things to somebody and we don't clarify or we don't ask. And I think that we need to. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the clarifying question. And St. Francis of Assisi, he died a long time ago, but he wrote, "Make me a channel of your peace." And I guess 1912 is when that prayer with that song was written. It was like, the essence is this: seek to understand and be understood. That's the essence of communication. It's seek to understand and be understood. And St. Francis of Assisi is a long time gone, and 1912 is a long time ago. So here we are in 2022, still looking to be understood and to hear people and to try to understand them. So it's really important that we seek those things. But if we don't ask questions, we won't know the answer, because we sometimes jump to conclusions, and and then we make stuff up, and then we're in real trouble because we're not asking questions. So we make it up, and then we've created a whole other dynamic because we didn't communicate ourselves in an emotionally intelligent manner or in a responsible manner, I would say. Angela, I know you just sent me a message, and I think it was about questions.
And I was just going to highlight that there is a question that's come in. So just let me know whenever you'd like to start taking questions.
Oh, any moment. I can take one anytime. Go ahead.
Okay. Is now a good time?
Sure, take it.
Okay. So here's a question. I am trying to be better about not assuming and asking questions. Sometimes I will ask if a person is frustrated with me, or I will ask, "Did you mean this?" It is taken by some people as though I'm being sarcastic or condescending. What am I doing wrong?
Okay, so that's a really good question. So I think, the clarifying part is, look, this is what I think you said, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. And I think that's really important, because if you say, look, this is what I think you said, or this is what I heard, or this is how I took it, I could be wrong. So you can be wrong, have big shoulders, and then let them open up that door. So you say, this is what I think you said, or this is how, so are we okay? Is there anything else you need to tell me? Do we need to have another conversation about this? So you're not doing anything wrong, but sometimes it's how we say it. And we just need to say, look, this is what I think I heard. I could be wrong, because goodness knows I've been wrong a few times. And I've said that to people. I said, look, I could be wrong. However, and we're going to use the word however rather than the word but, only because it's a linking word rather than a stopping word, because the word but stops it and the word however links it. So I would suggest that might be one approach. Is there another question, Angela?
And Christine says, thank you. Good point.
You're welcome.
So certainly just want to let folks know if there's some other questions. And here's one. Comment s'affirmer à titre de superviseur en personne auprès de quelqu'un de sensible?
How to be firm as a supervisor in real life with somebody who is very sensitive.
As a supervisor, how do you affirm yourself with respect to someone who may appear to be sensitive?
Okay, so so we all know that, you know, our we've got some super sensitive people, we've got, you know, some sensitivities, because a lot of people may have triggers that we're not aware of, which has sometimes created a conflict because we don't know. Somebody might say, you know, whatever, a word or a phrase, and you're thinking, you know, the joke we used to use was, you know, that person was 10 years old before they didn't know their name wasn't Get Wood. You know, so we have triggers that can come from trauma, from past experience, from things that caused us a lot of pain. And somebody may inadvertently use a word or a phrase, and it takes us sort of right back to that space. So, you know, we have to be careful that we're not labeling somebody as super sensitive or hypersensitive as well, because everybody is different. But I think you may want to inquire, or as a supervisor, you can't know everything about all people. You don't know what people's sensitivities or past is or whatever. Some people are very private. They don't share a lot of information. Other people come in and they sort of share a lot of information, or there's too much information. So I'm not sure what the situation is. But I think the supervisor needs to be, of course, mindful around that, but also be very sensitive to other people's sensitivities, as long as they're not unreasonable. And, you know, because we all act as reasonable people, we like to think. So we try to set the standard or our due diligence of behavior around the average reasonable person. You know, so would an average reasonable person be offended or hurt or distraught, or take them aside privately and said, look, I apologize. You know, it seemed that you might have taken it this way. Can we talk a little more? Is there anything I can do differently in how I communicate with you? Or what do you need from me? Because here's how, you know, sometimes I say things, and you know, really take them aside and inquire emotionally and without being, you know, condescending or you know, authoritarian, and just be very genuine about, look, I did not mean that. I'm sorry. You know, I just had that happen to me last week with somebody. It wasn't in a workplace, but it was a personal thing. And I said, you know, I could have handled that better. I kind of went over the top when I was, you know, I got engaged there when I shouldn't have. It's none of my business. And I apologize to you for that, because I know how hard you're working at this thing. And then you know, I bought a little card and something and said, you know, I just need to be sorry because I did something that I thought, why'd you get into that? That's not your business, you know? And so I owned it, and that was the end of the story. So I think that's important, that we are responsible for how we communicate. We're responsible for how we speak. But there's other people, you know, who sometimes don't have the skill level that we may have too. So we've got to go where they are. You find people where they are and you go with that. You know, I think that's important. We're not the center of the universe. Nobody is. But some people, you know, the way they communicate sometimes, you just got to go. There's two sides to everything. Your side, my side. There's a side to everything. And our perspectives are all different. And our contribution to everything is different. So what did we contribute to that conversation? How were we seen? How were we heard? What's our responsibility to take accountability for that as well? That's very important, especially in a leadership position. You are at a higher duty to responsibly understand your contribution and your response, for sure. Definitely, there's a higher standard. But the other thing is, we can't blame everybody for everything either, because that's disempowering, right? So we have to take some responsibility for how we said or did something too. Get the facts. Keep it simple. Don't use big words when small words will do. Manage and regulate your own emotions, because there's a lot of regulation around emotions that's tricky right now. And COVID has definitely not helped with regulation of our emotions. COVID has exacerbated everybody's buttons. COVID has done a lot of things around communication, around deregulating our emotions. So that's important.
And Sally, there are a few other questions that have come in. If you'd like
Go
me
ahead.
to bring those forward as well.
Yep.
So how can I work to increase my own EI, emotional intelligence awareness?
Well, number one, think about how you communicate. Like, how do I say things to people? Am I short and to the point? Do I listen to them and care about what they say? Am I hearing what they're actually saying? And am I picking up what they're not saying? So remember, in all communication and all messaging, there's a receiver and a giver, but there's a purpose to it. What is the purpose of the communication? In what capacity are we speaking right now? So those things are very important. And to recognize, what you can do to make it better. So getting the facts, know when to hold them and know when to fold them. When do I have a conversation? Do I wait? Is it really that important? Do I let this part go or say this part? What am I trying to achieve? So really think about mindfulness around saying what I want to say and how I say it to whom. That's really one of the first things. And I have a thing that's called take out the trash. Take out the trash is a couple of words you can remove from your vocabulary right away. The word should. The only time you should use word should is if the building is on fire and you should get out of the building right now. Okay, because nobody likes to be should upon. All right, nobody likes to be should upon. You should do this, you should do that, you should. Whoa, hold the bus, people. Should is a horrible word. You can change the vocabulary by saying, what would happen if, or how would it look if? And I often give the example of the teenager doing the homework, or being, you've got a teenager living with you that's in university. Some people have that this week. Okay. They're living under your roof and they're going to school. Irrespective of who's paying the tuition or that they're in your house, where does it say that you tell them you should do your homework or you should study? What would happen if you said this? Oh, okay, Mary Beth, or okay, John. What would happen if you didn't do your assignment? What would happen if you didn't finish that work? What happens if? Now, they may not answer you, but there's a consequence or an outcome to their behavior, to their choice. It's not yours. You don't own it. It's theirs. So when you say you should do your homework, you should do this, they know that. They don't need you to tell them. But if you reframe it to what would happen if, and you kind of let them be, leave them alone. That's it. It takes a while to learn that, but it's way better for your blood pressure than the word should. The other take out the trash word is but. I really like you, but, or I like that project you sent me, but. Well, as soon as you say but, they don't hear anything else. It's gone out the door. Use the word and. I really like this. And I think between us, we can sort this out because we need to have a conversation around the numbers or that annual report. There was a paragraph that I think we could tweak a little. And I'm sure we can sort it out. Bring them in as a joint problem solver. Don't use the word but. And the other one is, I can't say the word. I can spell it because I don't like the word. I've never rarely used the word. STUPID. If we call somebody that word, it's probably one of the worst forms of abuse, or the word IDIOT. But if you put those two words together in the workplace and call somebody those, because I've seen it happen. I've done a ton of investigations where people have been called those words and they don't belong in the workplace. They don't belong in your house. They don't belong on the street. So that's called that, take out the trash. So try to use, if there's a behavior that's happening and you're not getting what you need, calling somebody the S word or calling them an I word doesn't let them know what they did that needs to change. So we're not giving them anything by calling them a name. But if we want to say to them, look, we really need to get those numbers in by 2:00, or, could you deliver XYZ down the road that was supposed to go to, 442, Johns O Street, not 224. Well, somebody wrote it down wrong. But to call them the S word because they delivered something to the wrong spot, they'll never know what they did wrong if you don't give them the facts. Give them what they need to help them to sort it out. So I leave that with you because, calling people names is not emotionally intelligent communication. Is there another question, Angela?
Yeah, sure. So the next one is more of a comment or an observation. So I'll just share it. I don't know if everyone has access to see one another's. So there may be, and in quotations, generational differences in communication styles. Some
Oh.
people do not want to speak on the phone.
Absolutely. I have 3 kids, adults. So yes, it's generational for sure. So definitely some people don't speak on them. Some people don't even have a phone. So absolutely, but it irrespective of the method of communication, if it's not on the phone, well, then it's going to be via text on the phone because that's still a phone. So you have to figure it out that way, or say, please get in touch with me. We need to have a live conversation. So reach out and say, I would really appreciate it if you phone me, because you may not get them on the phone. And there's definitely generational differences, 100% yes. But we need to work around them and with them.
Yeah. And we have another participant with a question. How could I assist my employees in continual awareness and use of emotional intelligence? We've had training, however, it isn't a quick learning curve.
Oh, not even at all. So the thing is, I think though, if we have our tailboard meetings or our group huddles or whatever people call those meetings now, or what are we doing today meetings or our group get-togethers, I think it's something that we can bring up a lot and often, and we ought to, just like we do with safety. We can have a check-in every day, or we have notices, or we send out little blasts every now and then. Are we thinking before we speak? Are we thinking before we write? Are we communicating in a way that's respectful and emotionally intelligent? Are we aware that there's 2 sides to everything, a receiver and a sender? Are we getting what we need by using the skills that we have? So every opportunity that you can bring it up, just like we do with safety or wellness, is an opportunity to get together. Or if you're popping down the hall and you hear or see something that's not quite maybe respectful or okay, you kind of check in and deal with it there and say, hi, is everybody cool? What's going on? Anything I can do to help? But checking in, having your finger on the pulse of your team is important. I mean, that's part of respectful communication. It's part of emotional intelligent behavior, that you are on board and you're not afraid to intervene, and that you set the standard for your people. So reminders, or you might see a phrase or a word or a quote that says, how we're going to treat each other, and kind of send it out to everybody and say, hi, how's it going? Do you need any help with some of this? Because we can all go to the, our 3-hour or 1 day or 2 day training, and then kind of we get back and we're pretty good for a while and then we forget, so it's important to make it a daily practice. So if you wake up in the morning, like I say, everyone has their shower or whatever and they work, or if you work shift work, before you go out the door, not many people go out the door and say, oh, I think I'm going to be disrespectful or mean today. I think I'm not going to be nice today. I think I'm going to communicate inappropriately today. We don't wake up and, get ready to go to work and do that. We don't. So you want to wake up and say, look, how can I make today better for everybody and for myself? Because if you are exhibiting emotionally intelligent behavior and communication, you're going to get it back. It'll come back to you. So it's an investment. Being mindful around those communication tactics that we talked about is an investment in your in your space, in your organization's place, and for yourself. It's an investment. And the other part is, don't engage in conversations that are not your business. If we minded our own business and didn't attach to other people's stuff that has nothing to do with us, then that's emotionally intelligent behavior. Emotionally intelligent behavior says, I don't get involved in gossip and rumor or innuendo. I don't. It's not part of my life, because my life is so much better without it. And it will be if you disengage. We can't help it because we're human and we get in little clusters sometimes. We can't help it. It's what we do. Yeah. But it's not helpful for your health.
And we have about 1 minute left. And how about one more question?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a good book recommendation for developing emotional intelligence and how to communicate with someone who does not have much emotional intelligence?
Okay. There is one of my favorite books is Difficult Conversations. It's by Patton and Sheen, Patton. And do you want me to go get the ISBN? It's right there in my cupboard. Or do you want me to, can I type it in here? I don't know.
You can pop it into the chat at the end if you'd like. How about that?
Oh yeah, you think I can find
I can try to do that, guys.
Okay.
I don't mind. It's also one of my favorites.
Okay, because it's to me, Nicole, that's the best book. I've read many. I've read all of the others, but that one I keep going back to because it's so practical and functional. It's practical. It's got really good examples. Yeah. Yeah.
And Nicole seconds that in the work
Oh,
that
there
she
you go.
does
She
in
seconds that.
informal conflict management as well.
Yoo-hoo.
So Sally, on behalf of the Workplace Violence Abuse Research Team, we want to thank you for your offering of supporting folks in how to better communicate with one another. And our theme this year is Beyond COVID. And I just thought about one of the questions that you put out to the group. So what do we need from each other given new ways of communication? So you talked about that virtual communication like Zoom and Teams and all of that jazz. So I thought that was a really great question and a nice reflective question for us. And you talked a lot about self-awareness and intention versus impact.
Yeah.
So thank you for your offerings
Thank
and
you.
the time to answer questions from the audience.